Most people remember Sean Connery first and foremost as James Bond, the role that made him an icon. But for sci-fi and fantasy fans, he left behind films that were bold and sometimes strange, but in the best way. This August 25th would have marked his 95th birthday. It's the perfect moment to revisit some of Connery's films that took him into space, dark futures, and legendary adventures. It is gloriously bonkers, the kind of film that could only happen on such a large scale in the 1970s. Connery plays Zed, a savage from the wastelands whose people are taught to kill by their god Zardoz, a giant floating stone head that delivers them weapons. Driven by curiosity, Zed sneaks inside the head and discovers the unsettling truth. His people have been manipulated by an immortal ruling class, living in comfort but drained of purpose. His arrival shakes their stagnant society and exposes the emptiness of eternal life. Zardoz was a brave move for Connery. Some say he needed the money, but he also admitted the script absolutely caught his imagination. What gripped him was that the story wasn't about rockets or spaceships at all, but about how society might change if people no longer died, how that would erase desire and transform human nature completely. Director John Boorman, coming off the success of Deliverance, was given free rein to make his vision. He first thought of Burt Reynolds, but it's hard to imagine him carrying off the thigh-high boots or red loincloth, or projecting the same raw masculinity Connery brought to the role. We talked about Outland not long ago in the video on forgotten space westerns, and as part of Connery's filmography, it's also worth highlighting here. Director Peter Hyams said he wanted to make a western, but since the genre was considered dead, he set it in space instead. For him, it was about the tough frontier life, only moved to Io, and getting Connery for the lead was a stroke of luck. This one is well thought out, realistic, and not overdone like so many modern movies. No aliens, no crazy spaceships, just Sean Connery on Io, working an oil rig-like station, facing down a handful of corporate thugs. It may not have been the flashiest sci-fi of its era, but it remains gripping, and even earned an Oscar nomination for Best Sound. In the same year came Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. On the surface, it looks like a children's fantasy, but Gilliam took it in a darker and stranger direction. The story follows young Kevin, who joins a band of time-traveling dwarves and stumbles through different eras. Connery shows up as King Agamemnon of ancient Greece. He plays it with weight and pathos, and the straighter he delivers the role, the more humor comes through. Gilliam called him the big prize of the cast, and it's easy to see why. He isn't on screen for long, but there's a warmth to his performance that gives the film an extra lift. It also stands as one of his coolest non-Bond roles. He carries himself with that unmistakable swagger, looks terrific in the costume, and seems to be having a great time. Highlander is the kind of fantasy epic that doesn't really get made anymore. It follows Connor MacLeod, played by Christopher Lambert, an immortal warrior who battles his enemies in modern-day New York while recalling centuries of history. The mythology is dense, the sword fights are beautifully staged, and of course there's the iconic soundtrack by Queen, with Freddie Mercury's voice giving the film a larger-than-life energy. But what really holds the movie together is Sean Connery as Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, an immortal mentor who trains MacLeod in the art of the duel. Connery throws himself into the role with real conviction, turning scenes that could have felt campy into something memorable, whether delivering questionable lines as if they were ancient wisdom or guiding Lambert through training. It's not the best, but it's a lot of cheesy fun. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, released in 2003, takes place at the turn of the century, where a group of famous literary characters is brought together to stop a villain known as the Phantom before he can trigger a world war. The film was torn apart by critics, and is often called one of the worst movies of the 2000s, though that feels unfair. The steampunk design is stylish. The action has energy, and it delivers a pulpy kind of adventure if you don't go in expecting a masterpiece. The troubled production, however, left Connery disappointed, and afterward he chose to retire from acting. It's not his strongest role, but it remains his final appearance on screen. If you've made it this far, here's a little bonus. Back in 1959, Disney released Darby O'Gill and the Little People, a mix of Irish folklore and leprechaun mischief. It's not a typical Disney musical, but it does have one standout moment: Sean Connery, in an early role as Michael McBride, singing Pretty Irish Girl. Just a few years before James Bond made him a star, he reveals a softer, more romantic side that plays against his rugged screen presence. The film is mostly playful, but it drifts into eerie territory at times. And if you grew up in the 60s, it may well have been your first brush with on-screen frights.